Howdy. We are going to talk about Chapter 12, how laws get made. Such a question. How do laws really get made? One of the first things that happens in Congress, there's a new Congress that convenes. Lawmakers from each party meet to choose congressional leadership. This happens before Congress actually convenes so that they can make sure that when they're in there doing the actual work of Congress, voting for majority leader, Speaker of the House, things like that, that they're all on the same page. Press the timer. Committee assignments are important. The leaders of each party decide the number of seats each party gets on a committee. So what happens is the majority party, right now the majority party in the House is the Republican Party, the majority party in the Senate is the Democratic Party, and their leadership makes sure that their party has a majority on each committee. So if the committee is going to have 15 people, they're going to make sure at least 8 of them are members of the majority party. Some committees are more desired or more important, especially if they have to do with money. Then that would be something that you'd want to be more interested in, or defense, intelligence. Sometimes those things are more desired. So they kind of want to work their way up to the cooler committees. New members, freshman members of the House, freshman members of Congress are going to get less desired committees, ones that aren't necessarily as popular or not perceived as important, things like that. Seniority is a big factor in choosing the committee chairs. It can affect which committee you get on, and it also affects who the chairperson of the committee is. In other words, the person who's been, say, like the Committee on Agriculture, for example. I don't even know if there is one, but I'm sure there is. Whoever is going to be the chair of that committee is usually whoever's been on that committee the longest. So not necessarily the oldest. Seniority meaning who's been there the longest. So if you started in Congress when you were 30, and then, by the time you're 40, you've been there 10 years. If a guy is brand new when he's 50, he's only been there 1 year. The younger guy has been there longer. He has more seniority. He's more likely to become the chair of the committee. On the first day of a new session of Congress, there's a lot of ceremonies. The House votes for a speaker. Remember, they've determined this beforehand, so they all go and they all make sure they're voting for the same person. The speaker takes the oath of office, and then they swear in all the other House members. The vice president is the president of the Senate, so so far it's always been a he, someday it'll be a she, swears in the members of the Senate. And they take an oath, and in their oath they swear to support and defend the Constitution. That's part of the oath that they take. Might be on a quiz. Working in committees, they choose chairpersons, often by seniority. I'm glad that's redundant. I've put that in there twice now, and I've already explained it to you, so I'm not going to explain it again. Always a member of the majority party, because what happens is the committees are important, and so they want to make sure that the majority party controls what happens in a committee, because stuff doesn't come out of committee unless there's a majority vote in favor of that happening. And so the party that's in power wants to make sure that they're able to ensure that they can guide what happens with the legislation. Bills must be introduced by a member of Congress. So in order for it to get to a committee, it has to be introduced. If it's going to be introduced in the Senate, it has to be introduced by a senator. If it's going to be introduced in the House, it has to be introduced by a representative. The president can't introduce a bill. If the president has an idea for a law, they have to call a friend of theirs in Congress and ask them to introduce the bill. Whoever introduces it is called the sponsor. There can be co-sponsors if there's more than one person. And then the Speaker of the House, or in the Senate, the presiding officer of the Senate, will assign the bill to the appropriate committee, depending on what the topic is that the bill is dealing with. The committee chair, remember we talked about the committee chair being chosen by seniority, decides what to do with the bill. For example, they can ignore it, and it won't become a law. So you introduce your bill, it gets assigned to a committee, and then that committee chairperson thinks your bill is a horrible idea. They can just never bring it up, never calendar it, never talk about it, never discuss it. And there's nothing you can really do about it. You could reintroduce and hope it gets assigned to a different committee, but that's unlikely. You're more likely to have to wait for a new session of Congress. If they do like it, then it will get assigned to a subcommittee, a committee within the committee that will study the bill and look at the issues in a little bit more depth. In this subcommittee, there's a couple of different things that can happen. The first part is hearings. And so what they do is members of Congress should be, experts in a lot of areas, but they're not necessarily experts. So they will have someone come in that is an expert in that specific area that the bill is dealing with, and then they'll give testimony, and they can ask questions. So if it has to do with science and technology, they might have a scientist in that area come in, and they can ask the scientist questions. Is this bill going to be beneficial to the American people, to whatever you're trying to accomplish? Is it counterproductive? So that they know they can be educated when they're making a decision about how to vote. After they have these hearings, they hear from experts, they have an opportunity to do what's called markup. They make changes or amend the bill Okay, and so maybe the bill was introduced after hearing expert testimony. Then they decide, oh, well, this is still a good idea, but we need to make a couple changes. And so that's what they do. That's what markup is. And then they're going to determine the final language. So any changes they're going to make, what is it that we're going to keep working on later? And then report is when they send the bill back to the full committee. Remember, the full committee assigned it to a subcommittee. Does it come back from the subcommittee out to the full committee? It depends on how they vote. So report really means vote. The subcommittee will vote. A simple majority votes no, it goes away, you never see it again. Simple majority votes yes, and then it goes to the full committee. In the full committee, you can have more hearings, you can have more amendments or markup. And then if they report on it favorably, if they vote yes by simple majority, then it goes to the full House or the full Senate for a floor vote. So that would be, if this was a subcommittee in the House, it'd go to the full House. Subcommittee in the Senate, it'd go to the Senate. And in that's when they have a floor vote. Now, the House has 435 members. And because there's so many members, they need some rules to structure how they're going to debate stuff and when they're going to debate it and what the rules about debate are going to be when it's on the full floor of the House. In the Senate, they don't have that. Usually when it comes out of committee, they're going to vote on it right away, and they usually determined by unanimous consent of the members present. So it's kind of more informal. But in the House, they have to have a House Rules Committee because there's so many of them. And so to kind of keep it orderly, the House Rules Committee will schedule when it will be debated on and voted on, and they set rules for how long you can debate and how many people get to debate. So it's not all of them. And then the Speaker of the House has a lot of influence over the Rules Committee. So if it's something the Speaker likes, they might fast track it and say, make sure you talk about this one tomorrow. We're in a big hurry. If they hate it, they might say, put it off until February 30th. That way we can get to it never. That's something that can legitimately happen. End of part 1. 6.5 minutes.